Back and welcome to a new session, a new round of learning in our Thursday Beit Midrash. Today and the next four sessions we're together. I'm going to be teaching some select passages from different Zionist philosophers, and I got them all out of this book. It's called The Zionist Idea, and it's edited by Arthur Hertzberg. And it's an old book. I've had this a very long time. I think this is even a second one for me. Yeah, it was copyrighted in 1959. Okay, so all of these, hi Howard. So all of these writers, there's nobody who is a modern, contemporary, 20th, 21st century kind of person. These are all early philosophers that we're going to look at. Today, we're going to look at what Hertzberg calls the precursors, right? Sort of even before Herzl, foundational thinkers who were among the first to express some of the ideas around Jewish nationalism and the fulfillment of some Jewish nationalist goal and what that might mean and how it should be done. Unlike our previous Batei Midrash, most of which focused either on the Tanakh, on Hebrew scriptures, or on the Mishnah most recently, we're going to be looking at these texts, but the analysis is not a textual analysis. We're not going to be reading the close critical reading like we did with the Mishnah, where every single word kind of matters and you take your time and you have to figure out the words. Instead, we're exploring their ideas more. And they use words that are, in many cases, I've found this to be, they're very formal writers. They're writing philosophically, and they're writing often in academic contexts or to an academically advanced audience. So they're writing in very flowery philosophical language, and that's fine. It's very lyrical and beautiful. But again, I hope we won't get hung up so much in the text as much as in the ideas that they're putting forward. One other thing I want to say before we jump right in is I'm not a scholar of Zionism, right? I like the things that we're going to share, but it's not comprehensive, and I don't know all the histories of these writers and everything about them and their biographies and exactly how to position each one so as to fit it into the larger context of Zionism. I'm more interested in the conversation, in trying to not understand them only in their own time, which I do want to do, but also as if they were talking to us, challenging us and how we think about Zionism and about the political and national rebirth of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, what that means for us. So I hope we'll take what were, for them, challenges to 19th century and early 20th century Jewish communities and read them also as challenges to 21st century Jewish communities, standing 75 years into the successful state of Israel. All right, so let me get my texts up here. Because I only have this in the book here, let's see how we get this. I'm going to have to open them up as like pictures. And hopefully we'll be able to see those. Yeah, I think we'll be able to see all of this. Okay, good. All right, you can see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. All right, that's good. Yeah. Okay. So our philosopher today is Moshe Hess, Moses Hess, and I'll give you a little bit of how Hertzberg introduces him. Hess wrote a book, an essay called Rome and Jerusalem. Rome and Jerusalem. And he's really speaking very passionately about the confrontation of Judaism with modernity, heavily influenced by Spinoza, heavily influenced by other 19th century philosophers who are challenging religious ideas with scientific thinking. And there is, of course, political and national and social upheaval and revolution throughout Europe that he's smack dab in the midst of. Hess, this is Hertzberg speaking here. Hess was born in Germany. When his parents left that city for Cologne in 1821, when he was 9, he was left behind. His parents regarded the opportunities for Jewish education then available in Cologne as insufficient. He remained in the charge of his grandfather, a rabbi by training, but not by profession. In the 1930s, Hegel's first book was published in 1837 and grew out of the atmosphere of the German philosophy and is entitled The Holy History of Mankind by a Young Spinozist. And so that's sort of how he first painted himself. Okay, so we're talking about the mid-1800s is when he's writing, early to mid-1800s. All right. The Reawakening of the Nations. I'm going to start reading and then maybe other folks will read too. As long as the Jew denies his nationality, as long as he lacks the character to acknowledge that he belongs to that unfortunate, persecuted, and maligned people, his false position must become ever more intolerable. What purpose does this deception serve? The nations of Europe have always regarded the existence of Jews in their midst as an anomaly. We shall always remain strangers among the nations. They may even be moved by a sense of humanity and justice to emancipate us, but they will never respect us as long as we make ubi bene ibi patria our guiding principle, indeed almost a religion, and place it above our own great national memories. What that means, Latin, it means, hang on, I'm going to get the translation correct. It basically means so long as everything's working out okay, it's okay. It means wherever it is good, that is the homeland. In other words, it's the guiding principle of the diaspora Jew. Why live in the diaspora? Well, it's good here. We Jews do not have a homeland. We are not a nation. Things are good in Germany. That's my homeland. Things are good in France. Things are good in America. Things are good in Iraq, Algeria. Wherever things are good, that's where the Jewish homeland is. He continues. Religious fanaticism may cease to cause hatred of the Jews in more culturally advanced countries. I believe that was really their hope at the time, that was true, but I doubt that it really is. But despite enlightenment and emancipation, the Jew in exile who denies his nationality will never earn the respect of the nations among whom he dwells. He may become a naturalized citizen, but he will never be able to convince the Gentiles of his total separation from his own nationality. What do y'all make of that? True? Just on a simple level, is that true?
That seems to me to echo something I think Trump said about the about Jews being more having divided loyalties. So he was talking about to Israel, but I mean the idea of having a divided loyalty.
Do we have divided loyalty, Margaret? Well, no, maybe that's not maybe that's not quite the right question. That's not really the right question. What I mean is the charge of divided loyalty has, right, was always significant. And he's saying you cannot escape that charge. True or not true? Your nation may be enlightened. You may be equal and citizen-wise, but people will still think that they will still consider you separate. You can never completely convince the Gentiles that you're not somehow separate.
I think that's true.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Not true.
I agree, Margaret. What was that, Howard?
I think it's more true than not true. I think there's a lot of truth in it. I think you can take an Italian immigrant to the United States, and after one generation, they're Americans. They're not Italians, but they're Americans. But
Italian.
But I think I think Jews are a little bit different. I think most people think of Jews as a people, not that you're not loyal, not that you're not, I mean, I'm certainly loyal and I think a good citizen and all that stuff, but there's no denying the Jewish aspect of it. I mean, it's more than just history.
It's the Jew who denies his nationality, right? Like, that's not that you don't have the nationality, it's that you deny it. And that the Jews, I think his basic claim here is, whether you believe it or not, whether you express it or not, Jews are a nation and will always be seen as one by the non-Jews. Marcia.
Yes, I think a perfect example is the example of Disraeli. He and his family converted to Christianity, but Disraeli was always considered Jewish. He was born Jewish, but they converted to Christianity, but he was always considered a Jewish person.
Let's read a little more of it. Someone want to continue? The Really Dishonorable Jew. And I want to read this, and then I'm going to let you all read a little more too, because this is so spicy and sharp. I mean, it's hard to read some of what he writes, but I like reading stuff like that. The Really Dishonorable Jew. Can you imagine whether if I started some article or sermon that way? I got up there. The truly dishonorable person here is that kind of guy over there. People don't really write like this anymore. The really dishonorable Jew is not the old type, pious one, who would rather have his tongue cut out than utter a word in denial of his nationality, right? Hess's problem is not with his old school grandfather, pious rabbi, and his parents, who didn't move him because the Jewish schools weren't good enough, right? So he doesn't have a problem with old world piety and religiousness, but rather the dishonorable kind is the modern kind, who, like the German outcasts in foreign countries, is ashamed of his nationality because the hand of fate is pressing heavily upon his people. The beautiful phrases about humanity and enlightenment, which he uses so freely to cloak his treason, his fear of being identified with his unfortunate brethren, will ultimately not protect him from the judgment of public opinion. That's incredible. His love, this statement here is very intense. Modern Jews, okay, liberal Jews, that's what we'd call them, right? Science-believing Jews. We use phrases like humanity and enlightenment, don't we? We do. We use them freely, he says, to cloak our treason. Our fear, it's really, we're afraid of being identified as Jewish and being identified with those poor Schmendrick Jews, our unfortunate brethren. And he has news for them. He has news for them. Guess what? That will not protect you.
But it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could inform your humanity and your universality. You don't have to, you can say, this is how I am a human being. I'm a Jew. So you're not denying your Judaism, but you're not only a Jew.
Right. So he is talking, Suzanne, about people who he's saying are embarrassed by their Jewishness, I think, or they want to be accepted so desperately by the broader universal society that they will only speak of things like, yes, enlightenment and universal values and those kinds of things. This is,
I guess in those times, the dichotomy was clearer too.
Right. You may mask yourself 1,000 times over. You may change your name. I mean, how many of my grandfather's generation changed their name? Great, right? They all did that. Religion, character. You may travel through the world so that people may not recognize you, right? No beard, no kippah, etc., etc. Yet every insult to the Jewish name will strike you even more than the honest man who admits his Jewish loyalties and fights for the honor of the Jewish name.
I have to speak because I don't think that it has to do with the past. I think it very much has to do with the not so distant past and the present, because that is, to me, the worst kind of anti-Semitism is when we as Jews look down on others who we think are our fellow Jews that we think aren't as good as we are. Like when the Eastern European Jews came to the US and the German Jews didn't want to have anything to do with them and looked down on them, because they look so Jewish. And even today, where even in Israel, we're fighting amongst those who, I just find it the worst kind of anti-Semitism when we judge other Jews because we think that we are better than them because we are more assimilated or don't look so Jewish or something like that. Apparently, I feel very strongly about this. Sorry.
Right. No, don't be sorry. You're totally allowed. And like I said, his writing is very harsh. I think it was meant to provoke people to have a very strong reaction to it. You don't write stuff like that if you're not trying to provoke people. And what I think the setting here, Cindy, is an attempt to try to understand why it is that Jews still find themselves in this situation. I mean, why is there still anti-Semitism? if we're is there something that we are doing? Is there some aspect of how we are presenting ourselves and to others that allows for the perpetuation of this phenomenon? I mean, we've done, what more can I do other than to preach universality and get rid of all of my Jewish accoutrement? And yet still, I'm hated. I think that's the mystery he's trying to understand. Yeah, Barbara.
But Hess is suggesting that the problem originates with the Jewish person. And I'm not so sure that that's correct. I think that non-Jews, certain groups of them, are taught that being Jewish isn't good enough. Right. And when they're taught being Jewish isn't good enough, I mean, there are examples in my own family. In high school, I think as a freshman, my son was approached by, I don't know, whatever group of Christian sect this girl was, and she wanted to help him to become a non-Jew so that he could become saved. Or I'm using the word saved. I don't know exactly what she said. So I don't think that the problem is, I think here's where Hess is suggesting that the issue belongs to the Jew, but it's also in the larger society that people have this opinion ingrained in them, and the Jew is responding, not if.
But Hess would not have said this, but I'm going to speak like in the voice of Hess, who's gone into a time machine and come back in the year 2021, and he would say, where that doesn't happen, Barbara? It doesn't happen in Israel. Right?
That's true, but not all the Jews can live in Israel.
No, right, but then what he's saying is but if you're going to do that in diaspora Jews, don't expect all the rest of the diaspora world to not see you as a Frenchman, right? If you were born in France and you live in America and you still speak with a French accent for the rest of your life and act, in some French cultural ways for the rest of your life, people are going to think of you as French, no matter how American you are. And so Hess is saying, you're going to feel the sting of anti-Semitism worse if you have been trying to hide your Jewishness.
But that's how he was approached. Yoni was still wearing his kippah, so it was obvious that he was a Jew. He wasn't trying. Here he is going to this secular high school for the first time. He's been in the day school all his life until then. Mm-hmm. And he stood out because of the kippah. So there he is, recognizably a Jew, and this attitude comes out.
Right. Every insult to the Jewish name, I'm going to call what happened to him an insult to the Jewish name. Right? That's what it means. It's some act of antagonism towards Jews. Will strike you even more than here's Yoni. Right? It will strike the Jew who would never be caught dead in public wearing a kippah, lest he be considered separate from the others. That's the person who will be stung more than the honest man who admits his Jewish loyalties and wears the kippah. Right? That what we think will get us out of the antagonism of non-Jews will ultimately make that antagonism worse. And this effort to run away from your Jewishness and from the undislodgeable nationalism, nationality that inheres in Jews will be fruitless. All right, let's read a little bit more. He's good, isn't he? It's good stuff. What is Judaism? Who wants to read here?
I'll read if there are no others. But I'm Jewish, and I don't want you to think that, I'm sticking my neck out as a Jew to do this. The threatening danger to Judaism comes only from those religious reformers, a breed that has by now happily vanished almost completely, who with their newly invented ceremonies and empty eloquence have sucked the marrow out of Judaism and have left only a shadowy skeleton of this most magnificent of all historical phenomena.
That's great, isn't it? Don't you? I'm sure what we're
talking about me.
I'm like, who is he talking about? Is he talking about me? He's not talking about me, right? Remember, he's writing in like the 1830s, early 1840s. This is before Solomon Schechter. This is really before the real development of the modern historical school of Jewish studies, etc. But it is not before the birth of the scientific study of Judaism, and it is not before the early and what we really very radical reformers.
And does he mean the Reform group of Jews?
Yeah, I think that's who he means. And remember, he's not religious. He has abandoned his religiosity, but he does seem to have a measure of greater respect for people who are all out religious than for people who are, it's not people who are more modern, it's people who hide and reject. The people who, in his words, have sucked the marrow out of Judaism.
Wouldn't he be happy now that they're going back to speaking more Hebrew and wearing kippahs?
Well, yeah, I think he would probably. He would say that is more likely to help us succeed as a community. All right, let's keep going, Barbara. Was not enough.
It was not enough for them to work toward the development of a Jewish learning on modern scientific lines.
Right, that's good, right? In other words, that part of what they did is good. To study Jewish tradition and Jewish learning with a modern scientific mindset. He's acknowledging that that's okay. That was good, but that wasn't enough, right, for them, or to satisfy the need
for an orderly and aesthetic form of our ancient Jewish religious practice.
Right. Also acceptable. That was also, I'm sorry, Barbara. I said I wasn't going to read the text closely, but like that's also acceptable. You want to modernize Jewish tefillah, an orderly and aesthetic form for Jewish practice. Okay, that's good too, right? Instead of the old world, small shul, davening, shuckling, right? No, aesthetic beauty to it in the modern sense of that, right? Those would have been good, but
they cultivated a religious reform that was not in keeping with the spirit of the age, that was fashioned in imitation of Christian models, and that was therefore a stillborn notion. It has not the slightest basis either in the general situation of the modern world or in the essentially national character of Judaism.
Wow. Amazing, no? Very strong indictment. Yeah.
He's already making the assumption that there's a national character of Judaism. He's not accepting any of the Jewish populations that are spread throughout the diaspora. He's saying right here, he's already pushing the nationalism, or saying it's an expected assumption.
It is an indelible part of being Jewish. I think that he's speaking to a group of people for whom Judaism could be seen just as a religion. something that could be compartmentalized either by being left and by, accepting the broader culture, non-Jewish culture, assimilation kind of thing, or by being limited to the synagogue and being, an Orthodox German person. Compartmentalized, I'm not, wherever it's good for Jews, that's the homeland, right? I'm compartmentalizing. I live in Germany, okay, I live in Germany. Right, I don't have a nation. He's criticizing both of those I don't have a nation people. The religious, pious ones who are like, hey, wherever we are, it's okay. We're a people without a land. And the reformers, as he calls them, people who try to not look nationally Jewish and to I'm German, not Jewish, who reject their nationality. And it does seem to me, and I think this is a hard part for a lot of people, especially with the way we live. It seems to me like a big part of this phenomenon for him is that the non-Jewish world will always see us this way. So why don't you see us this way? Everybody, if everybody looks at you and says, this is what you are, but you're over there saying, no, I'm not that. Right? He's saying that's naive. You are that. And you either don't know it or you reject it. At your own peril, I think he means. Because everyone else around you still will say that and still will see it that way. You will never be able, you can mask yourself 1,000 times.
He was actually proven correct with the Holocaust.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's hard to argue with him in his own time because, and I think this is he's an important influence on Herzl, who we're going to look at next time, who had a similar kind of experience where he thought, we're in the enlightened world. We're enlightened people, we're secular, we're university educated, we are out of the ghetto. And yet, they accused Dreyfus, ran him out of town on a rail. Mm-hmm. For Dreyfus he's like the perfect, example of what they were talking about. He literally rose to the highest ranks and doesn't matter. Your nationality will still be seen as Jew. That was enough to compel Herzl to say that Enlightenment thing will never work. Nice idea, won't work. All right, let's, there are 2 epochs. Someone else want to read?
There are 2 epochs that mark the development of Jewish law. The first, after the liberation from Egypt. The second, after the return from Babylonia. The third is yet to come, with redemption from the third exile.
Okay, can we just unpack that for a second there? So he's talking about 3 great periods, what Yitz Greenberg calls the commonwealths, the 3 commonwealths of Jewish history. One is biblical, right? We emerge from Egypt and we get the Torah at Sinai. Right? That's the beginning of Jewish law and practice. The second is after the return to Zion and the proto-rabbinic and the early rabbis, the Midrash, the Mishnah, the Maccabees, ultimately the rabbinic Judaism. And the third, in his day, yet to come, with the redemption from the third exile. So he's considering the state of world Jewry in that day to be exiled. We're living not just diffuse, but formerly something, not something, outside of something, pushed out of, not at home, ill at ease, not rested. Okay, the significance.
The significance of the second legislative epoch is more misunderstood by our reformers, who have no conception of the creative genius of the Jewish nation.
Boy, he's really harsh on those reformers. They have no conception. I don't think I would be quite this critical. Okay, then by our rabbis.
Then by our rabbis, who placed the lawgivers of this period even higher than Moses.
Right, that's the problem. The problem of the Orthodox is they think the rabbis of the Talmud are even more important than Moses. The problem with the Reform is they think those rabbis of the Talmud were just a bunch of jokers. Yeah, that's why I'm me. All right. Ezra would have
deserved that the Torah be given to Israel through him, had not Moses preceded him.
Right. Ezra, being the prototypical rabbi, say the rabbis, of course, Ezra was a better choice, but Moshe came first. Okay. That's a quote from rabbinic thinking.
In the form in which we possess it today, the Torah was handed down to us directly through the men of the second epoch. These same men, living at the same time, utilizing the same traditions and in the same spirit, collected both the written and the oral law, which they handed down to the later generations. There is no justification for ascribing a holier origin to the written law than to the oral. On the contrary, from the time of the return from the Babylonian exile, the living development of the oral law was always considered of greater importance than the mere clinging to the written law. The reason for this is quite evident. The national legislative genius would have been extinguished had the sages not occupied themselves with the living development of the law.
Good. So what he's doing here is establishing a historic Jewish foundation for a kind of radical innovation over time. If the rabbis had not done what they did and radically altered the expression of Jewish nationalism, our national genius would have disappeared. And I think he's only subtly implying the same is true now. Today, we have a similar phenomenon and an unwillingness to radically reinterpret Jewish nationalism and to allow the Jewish national legislative genius, right, our ability to see a different future and make it happen, we'd have disappeared. And we will disappear if we don't do it again. Here at the beginning of this third great epoch is what he's sort of saying. All right, one last thing. The nation as part of humanity.
Somebody else want to read, or shall I continue? I'm not seeing where it is to.
From the viewpoint of enlightenment, let's start.
Oh, okay. From the viewpoint of enlightenment, I see no tenable reason for the continued existence of either Judaism or Christianity.
Isn't that, I mean, what a really impressive thing to say. I don't even know what to say about it, but okay.
The Jew who does not believe in the national regeneration of his people has only one task: to labor like the enlightened Christian for the dissolution of his religion. This guy is something.
Right. I mean, if you are not committed to the national regeneration of the Jewish people, then the only logical choice for you is to work hard to dissolve Judaism and Christianity immediately.
I understand how one can hold such an opinion, but what I do not understand is how it is possible to believe simultaneously in enlightenment and in the mission of the Jews in the dispersion.
Right.
In other words, how is it possible to believe at once in the ultimate dissolution and in the continued existence of Judaism?
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. All right, let's see what else I have here. I have a couple other pieces from it. Hold on. Okay, here. This is one last piece. Well, let's go back to that just for a second here. And any reactions to that?
What does he mean when he's talking about the national regeneration? Is he sort of thinking of a place like Israel, or is he just talking about the diaspora?
I think he is, well, he's speaking obviously in a pre-Zionist time to a diaspora audience of Jews and saying, if you are out there in the diaspora, meaning not in a Jewish nation, you live in a non-Jewish nation, if you are living the Enlightenment mission, which is to get beyond your parochial identity and live by humanity and more universal ideals, why are you still Jewish? If the Enlightenment has made old ways less relevant, and if you are not working against that by looking to regenerate the third commonwealth of the Jewish nation and bring us back from the dispersion, then why not? Then you don't believe, either you believe in the Enlightenment and its message of be like the nations, or you believe of the mission of the Jews in exile, which is we have a unique and distinct mission which keeps us separate from the nations. He's claiming those are incompatible. I'm not saying they are incompatible. I'm just saying he's claiming they're incompatible, and I'm saying they might be incompatible. Yeah, Barbara.
I think there are people who would hold this idea, but in a different way. Because it has been said to me by Jewish people that, well, I couldn't be Orthodox, but I really thank the Orthodox for maintaining Judaism. And, or, the I don't know, whatever the Hasidic group they're talking about is, whether you're talking about Brooklyn or you're talking about Meah Shearim. And he's not saying that.
No, he's not saying that. I don't think he's saying that. Look, I don't like the way that sounds, what your friend said, but I think...
Hello.
I didn't say they were my friend.
Hey.
But I'm not sure it's not, I mean, in a way, it's definitely true. Most kosher Torah scrolls, kosher tefillin, mezuzahs. If you eat meat, most hechshered meat is all that stuff. We're totally dependent on the Orthodox for that. Right? We can't really sustain our own community in that way without Orthodox support. But that is true for that's true for them too. Right? Because they have a place where people who they don't accept can go. They wouldn't have that.
The kosher butcher that comes to Birmingham couldn't make it on the KI population alone.
No, definitely not. That's right. Exactly. They need us too. Federations who support Chabad programming are funded almost exclusively by non-Chabad Jews. So how about that? We actually need each other. Too bad we can't get along, because we do need each other. No, I don't think he's claiming that that's true, that like, we don't need the Orthodox or everyone should be Orthodox. I don't think that's it. I think he's challenging the idea that being Jewish does not mean also being somehow separate.
Well, there's another idea. When I read Echad Ha'am, I remember him saying something like, in order for Judaism to stay alive, it had to be the law of the land. You had to live it in order for it to stay relevant and to develop. So it could be something as simple as that. It can't be something that you just practice in shul on Saturday, on Shabbat or something.
I do agree. I think it has to be lived, and if it's not lived, it won't last. It cannot just be an idea.
But then it also, that idea has within it that it's going to change some. It's not going to remain static. Just like it has changed. I mean, Orthodox people say things, it's
right. Well, they say it hasn't changed,
but the orthodoxy in my life has changed.
Has changed. It does change. Yeah, that's because it hasn't changed as an essential component of their own theology. It's it's an inherent part of their own authority system. We have authority because we are unchanging, as opposed to something like conservative and possibly reform, which is we have authority in part because we are changing. Right, that is part of what gives us contemporary authority. All right, let's look at one last passage here. Social regeneration. The masses are never. Oh, someone else want to go?
I'll read it.
Go for it.
The masses are never moved to progress by mere abstract conceptions. The springs of action lie far deeper than even the socialist revolutionaries imagined.
Suzanne, that's what you were talking about, right? You have to live this. You can't just think about this stuff and be like, abstract. People are not motivated by abstract ideas, is what he's saying here. With the Jews, Marcia?
With the Jews, more than with other nations, which, though oppressed, yet live on their own soil, all political and social progress must necessarily be preceded by national independence. A common native soil is a precondition for introducing healthier relations between capital and labor among the Jews. The social man, just like the social plant and animal, needs a wide, free soil for his growth and development. Without it, he sinks to the status of a parasite, which feeds at the expense of others.
Okay, hold on right there. Because that's some very, very powerful stuff. And I do think it goes to what Suzanne was saying, but takes it from sort of family life to a national level, right? If you're not living Judaism in your home, for example, it's very unlikely that your kids are going to have a deep sense of what Judaism is. A common native soil is a precondition for, right? A rich Jewish home life is a precondition for a healthier relation. And for him, especially in the mid-1800s, especially heavily influenced as Hess was by Marx and all of the other contemporary socialists and communists talking about labor and capital, that's even more so for the Jew who is not in their native soil. And that has to happen first, or we will be like a parasite, living off of someone else's sustenance. That's what parasites do. Keep going, Marcia. Let's just finish this out and then we'll talk about
Okay,
this
the
one.
parasitic way of existence has played an important role in the process of human history to date, and is by no means restricted to the Jews. As long as science and industry were not sufficiently developed, the land in the possession of any nation was never large enough to maintain the entire population. The nations were therefore forced either to make war and enslave one another, or to allow their own populations to divide into ruling and servile classes. But this social order of dog eat dog, based upon the exploitation of men, collapsed as soon as modern science and industry began to dominate the world.
All right.
He is one sick man.
Well, here's what I think. More than that, Suzanne, and especially here, I think this is important because these were very operative ideas in his world. The idea that that people warred and fought because there wasn't enough, and that industry and the Industrial Revolution and science would eliminate that reality. There will be enough. Science and industry are going to solve the underlying problems of humankind. That dog-eat-dog world that we used to read about in the old books, that's going to be gone as soon as modern science and industry begin to dominate the world. He believed that. A lot of people believe that. A lot of people still believe it. Don't worry, we'll technology our way out of it. And maybe in some ways it's true. After all, we are, to a measure, less violent and exploitative of one another than we used to be. But I think we'd be hard pressed to say that the wonders and innovations of technology and science and innovative thinking and industry have eliminated the dog-eat-dog nature of humanity. I mean, look around. I don't think we can make that claim. It's a very aspirational claim that he's making. But it proved to be wrong. In fact, again, it's the Shoah proved these guys right in a lot of ways and wrong in some ways. The Shoah proved wrong the idea that a highly developed cultural, technologically sophisticated nation would never act this way. They just acted that way more efficiently and more effectively. So industry and enlightenment do not change human nature, it turns out. And I think that's part of his claim, is some of this stuff is not neck up. You can't talk your way out of the essential peoplehood of the Jewish people. We have been, we will be, we are a nation. And you can't negotiate intellectually your way out of that. Even as some of the things that made the old world are falling away, those things are not falling away and they are still true. And that is the milieu, I think, in which Herzl is going to really concretize this idea and not only talk about it in the abstract way, but to propose der Judenstaat, right? A Jewish state as an actual real life embodiment of what he is talking about here. And yeah, and we'll look at Herzl next time.
When you go through these, will we be doing them in order of time?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Basically. In part because that's the order that Herzberg has put them, although he's kind of grouped them ideologically more than that. Like he has, you know, intellectuals, ideologists, the religious Zionists. You know, we're going to look at Cook, but not really in order because he's part of the religious Zionist thing. So that's just sort of a separate category here in Herzberg's book.
Rabbi, is this the one we did today? What year did he write this, did you say?
In the 1840s.
Well, don't you think he was sort of a precursor, a thinker about the land, that the Jews needed a land?
Yes, I do. And I think that tied into his economic understanding as well as his the philosophical zeitgeist, which is that land matters. Underneath everything is a place, is a land. And especially as the nations of the world were defining borders, were defining national boundaries and identities, especially in Europe, he's heavily influenced by that. And also as a socialist, communist, the idea that, you know, back then, labor was primarily agricultural labor and only starting to be industrial labor. And so the idea, capital meant land, right? You had to have capital didn't mean you owned the factory necessarily. It meant you owned the land. And that's why he says, you know, we could descend into this hierarchy of serfs and elites, or I can't remember the two words he used, but basically people who own the land and people who work the land in order to be able to feed themselves from it. That was the emerging, and that's why for so many of the Zionist thinkers, the idea of the Jew as a laborer was so important. The Jew as a farmer, to work the land, not for somebody else, but to work the land for, you know, for the people. Yeah. Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, for Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. Medina, Eretz, Am. Great. Thanks, everybody. And happy Chag Sameach, happy Israel Independence Day.
Thank you.